Can you speak once?
Hello, hello, 1, 2, 3.
It's weird. The earlier one was working. Why is it not working now?
The worst thing this happens is
You
like
just
go up or we had it like 4 seconds ago.
it was working just now, like a couple of minutes back.
Yeah.
Sound check, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, sound check.
Over here.
Can you like
Plug and unplug this?
you can try that once. Let me work. Yeah, that's good.
Check, sound check. Sound check.
Okay.
Is it good now?
Yeah, we're
Great.
back. What?
It's self-working.
Yeah, the audio was like gone.
And now you're. And so I'm like.
So I just focus on her.
Yeah. Actually, until she starts talking, if you can focus just on the slides. Yeah, that. When she starts talking, switch back to him. Is the microphone on?
Twice. Third time will be the turn, I'm sure. We're waiting to like the live stream, and that's really weird, but I talked to my hand, so I would be contented, and I don't know if I ran up the function, so. Perfect.
Here, I don't hear well enough.
Sound check, 1, 2, 3. Sound check. Sound check, 1, 2, 3.
We're good.
Perfect. Oh,
Hi, everyone.
Thanks for joining us. We're going to talk about sustainability in practice. As we know, in Coralus, we care a lot about building a better world and working on what we've always called the world's to-do list, the UN Social Development Goals. So before I jump in, just shout them out. What does sustainability mean to you? Okay. Health, wealth.
I was really proud of it out there.
Okay. If you remember, we'll come back. Yeah. Integration of people, planet, and purpose for those on the live stream. Hi, welcome. Nancy? Non-extraction. Excellent. Anybody else? Yeah, the ability to maintain, not decline. Amazing. Yeah, all great answers. And points to the diversity of what sustainability means to us personally, which is something that I discovered in my research. So hi to everyone on the live stream. My name is Melanie Love. I am coming to you from the lens of the Musqueam from the Coralus Unsummit here in May. So I have been an activator for since 2015. I help people get unstuck in their business and in their body. So in the business, that looks like working with change makers and trailblazers like Coralus to work on projects of kind of a 911, whatever they need. And then on the body side, I have an Unwind Bodyworks, which is a deep tissue fascia release modality that just went live to the world this week. So there we go. Thank you. So yeah, so Vicky, as Vicky does, when Vicky calls, you answer. And so she said, hey, I got a project for you. Would you mind interviewing our ventures and talking about how they do sustainability? So, which was amazing. So I got to talk to more than 29 of our Canadian venture portfolios. I've started to interview the international portfolios. And it turned out that a lot of our answers were the similar. So first of all, it was, what the heck is sustainability? What does it mean to you? And what we found that there was 3 pillars. Not surprisingly, it has a lot to do with people and the social and how we take care of one another, how we take care of ourselves. It comes down to the planet and being non-extractive, about being able to maintain and give back. And it relates to profits, which is the ability to stay in our, we can't fight the good fight if we're not here. And so profit is not a dirty word, as I'm sure any of you who've been in the money sessions have been very much aligning to, is that there is reciprocity, and our ability to receive is part of that equation. So that's some of what we heard in the study. And the research was very clear that none of us consider sustainability to be only green. None of us. Like our community was unequivocal about it not being an E or an S or a G. Some people said it's a 3-legged stool. You can't have one without the other. The whole thing falls over. That is not what we see in prevailing finance. One of the research outcomes that was very clear is that a lot of the funding is aligned in silos. So they will want the environmental, but not the social. They will want the social, but not the environmental. We've had more than a few of our portfolio companies told that you're too awesome. We can't fund you because can you just take away the social? We only want what you're doing and the awesomeness and the environmental, or the social fund saying, yeah, but it's too techie for us. You don't fit in our groove, right? And so, yeah, so fascinating to see how our community understands that holistic view, and that systems, hey, come on in, have not really embraced that so far. So one of the things we looked at, or that I dove into in the questioning, was, how do you do sustainability? It's one thing for us to talk about it, and a big part of Coralus is our shared community learning. So this how-to guide is a bit of that slipstreaming and a bit of that collective knowledge, so that everyone behind us can go further faster. So this is very much a tactical, practical look at how to do that. So I asked a couple of questions. What does this look like in terms of how you operate in the world? And then within the 4 walls of your organization, internally, what does that look like? And so in some cases, some people have green products, but they haven't thought much about, how does our office, how do we get to work? How do we you know, like what are our buildings, and other people's have thought deeply about that. And so it was interesting to see. So when we talk about in the report, the difference between the external and the internal differences, that's very much what we're talking about. And so, so it was very interesting to see how all of that played out. So one of the things that became loud and clear, one, it's a choice. So there's a quote from Yoda in the report, and I call this the Yoda answer. What is, you know, how do we do sustainability? What made you choose to do this? And I call it the Yoda answer because it is do or do not. There is no try. You choose to do it because it's important to you. That's it. Like there was no, like it was so patently obvious that people like looked at me like I was a complete idiot asking the question, right? Like they were, some of them almost struggled for the words to explain why sustainability was important to them because it was so self-evident. And yet it was important for other people to understand why sustainability, like this is still a question out there in the normies about why we should bother doing this. And so, so it's a choice. We simply begin, all paths to sustainability begin with a choice. Doing business better is a choice. And the other thing we learned is it's not easy being green. It takes a lot of extra time, effort, and money to be green. And even a story so about my Unwind Bodyworks, I use blocks, and so I wanted lighter weight, and I'm looking for ones that are made of eco foam, and I don't want to use EVA sourced from oil. And it's like, I tell you people, it is hard to find the substitutes. Like I can order it by the metric ton. So that would be the equivalent of about a football field size of volume. Like I would need to order like 1 million. So some of the stuff is available, but not yet to the smaller businesses, which goes to one of the key things, which one of the ventures said, our negotiation powers is one of the things. And so that's part of our collective wisdom. So we cannot do sustainability in and of ourselves. So the resounding answer was that there was no one place to go to learn how to be sustainable. You had to figure it out all on your own. You had to find your own community. You had to build your own network. You had to figure out what other people had done, what worked, what didn't work, what you tried. Is that compostable cup I paid an extra 50 cents a unit for compostable in my local municipal facility? Turns out no. Right? So if you don't ask the questions or know to ask the questions, so the power of our collective wisdom and our need to do this together was absolutely, like, it was utterly self-evident that there is no one central place. The other thing that was also self-evident that came out very strongly in the research was that most of the entrepreneurial platforms, networks, sustainability isn't on any business model canvas you will find. Like there's one in the social venture space that is, again, like you're already in that space, you're sort of preaching to the choir. But in most of the conventional entrepreneurship support, venture support, it doesn't exist. It's not even, it's a nice to do after everything else has been already, oh, you're already profitable, you're already, and the other thing we heard was that it's so much harder to undo all of those things once you've committed to those processes. It is so much easier to start doing it right from the beginning than it is to unwind it all. So the importance of the collective wisdom and the collective finding your people, the networking, the finding the people who've gone before and who've done it is super important. The other thing that came abundantly clear is that greenwashing is a huge problem and none of us want to contribute to that. And so to quote the 80s maxim, what gets measured gets done. It's important for us to count. We need to measure our impact to be able to know if we're making a difference. And that's where things get really, really messy, really, really quickly, and where learning from others who have gone before becomes a really important factor, because how to measure, what scope, how to, like, it can get very overwhelming very quickly. So our enduring recommendation is to start small and begin with where you are, which is always never bad advice. But it was very clear that it's important to measure, it's important to know what you're measuring, it's important to understand the language and what the terminology actually means when you're talking about your reductions and whether or not the impact is actually what it is before you put it out in the world. So, but yeah, the counting is important for impact. And that's something that we, our collective impact report, we talk about it all the time at Coralus, and it really does help us tell the story of how much change we are making and how much, you know, it's important for us, I think, to notice and see the difference, right? Like, I like to cook, I like to garden, and it's because most of what I do is moving, you know, numbers around on a screen. There's a discernible before and after, and there's something so deeply gratifying about knowing that discernible before and after, and that tracking helps us. So the happy people in the pool versus, so you're either in or you're in the way, is another thing that we very much heard. Or, as I like to say, the people doing it, or the people who say it can't be done, should get the frick out of the way of the people who are actually doing it. So a lot of the prevailing wisdom is that sustainability is something that gets done after. So once you're profitable, then this is a nice to do. And everyone that I interviewed, we have some 7- and 8-figure businesses in this profile who have been sustainable from day one and have built sustainable businesses that are non-extractive, that are circular, that treat their people well, that pay fair wages. All of these things that conventional wisdom says is not profitable and cannot be done. And yet you are either in or you're in the way. We see it happening within our portfolio. So we put together a how-to guide. So by definition, so it logically, the companies broke out into stages. Not everyone is at the same stage. So we have a start phase, which by definition, none of our Coralus companies are in the start because we've already committed to change. We're already on the world's to-do list. So none of our portfolios are in the start. That's for people who are outside of our framework. But then we have a grow, a deepen, an expand, and a surpass. And these are so when you're growing, you've chosen your one issue and you're learning about it, you're figuring out what to measure, you're learning the tactics, you're learning what to do, you're finding out what other people did, you're learning how to navigate all of the systems, you're finding your supply chain things out. It's very much a discovery phase. And the deepen and expand is where everything gets deeper, it richens, it's, you know, what you're measuring gets broader. Your knowledge, your terminology, you're ready to start talking about your impact because you have an idea, you know what it is that you're talking about. There's no chance of you greenwashing or, you know, inadvertently contributing to more problems without knowing what you're happening. And then the surpass people, we have quite a few, not the B Corp is the only standard of excellence by any stretch of the imagination, but we have I would say an above average representation of B Corps within our portfolio. And so the standards to which they hold, and then they are taking what's happening in their industry and blowing the doors off of showing new ways to do things within the portfolio. Before I do any deep dives does anyone have any questions or comments about their own experiences with sustainability and entrepreneurship? No? Adina? Oh, greenwashing. Yeah. Absolutely. So greenwashing is making claims that can't be substantiated. So something is not as environmentally friendly as it once thought. So Lynn Schwannard, who is the CEO of Patagonia, just issued a report 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, someone recently, about, lo and behold, some of the fabrics that they use are made from polyester, and polyester contributes to microplastics, and they contributes to shedding, which gets in our waterways. And he's like, yeah, whoops. So that's part of, and that was another huge overarching theme within the choose and the measure is the transparency, right? We cannot be in relationship without having that transparency. And so to his credit, he was like, look, this is a big problem. We're on it, and we need to figure out a way. So so their claims were not necessarily as advertised. There's lots of other corporate examples that have happened not to name names, but a certain period panty company, right, had the PFAS, where there was an additive in their, one of the fabric treatments in their underwear was something that could transfer to the human body and is not so great for our endocrine and reproductive health. And so, so that's an example of everything's safe for humans and not so much. So that, yeah, that's exactly what greenwashing is. So it's not aisle. Yes, exactly. Aisle has not been, aisles has been safe since day one. And to tackle, so I got to interview, speaking of the microplastics program. So one of our Coralus portfolio companies is Folds. So for those of you who haven't heard of Folds, Folds is Nina Carey's company. She's an engineer in Calgary. And during the pandemic, so she had a great clothing line and all of this in the pandemic, she got really frustrated by what was happening with hospital wear. And so she did a bunch of research and she found a factory that has nanotechnology that embeds antiviral and antibacterial, and it's non-shedding. So she makes antiviral, antibacterial scrubs that are infinitely recyclable and have zero shedding, like not down to the nanofiber. And so they don't contribute to any of that. And so, yeah, so that is one of our Coralus portfolio companies, and she's in the grow phase. And so she's one of the many profiles. So I interviewed, I think, 29 and counting. So each one of their profiles is in the report. And so you can pick by industry. We talk about, so for those of you that were on the tour yesterday in the dock, so I got to interview both Sonia Strobel from Skipper Auto. She's in the Surpass. She is absolutely changing systems and I also got to interview Breton from Ondine Ocean Farms, who just got a major influx of capital that's really going to help her change the way things are done. And so she has a regenerative ocean farm that uses kelp in vertical farming to grow oysters. So healthy food supply, natural food supply, regenerative for the oceans, creates oxygen. And then while she's doing it, she's doing ocean floor cleanup to clean up old discarded nets and bringing them to our friend. Also, I got to interview who is Chloe at Ocean Legacy. So Chloe Dubois is a phenomenal rock star of a woman who is changing how plastics are being manufactured and sold. And so she takes plastics from ocean cleanups and puts them in pellets and then resells them to people so that they can have 100% recycled content for particularly hard to recycle plastics, and they're the harder ones. So she's looking at the big people like IKEA and things like that. So totally changing the game, and really advocates for bringing multiple voices together. So the plastics industry is supposed to grow by $200 billion each year, every year. And so she is a big voice for saying, hey, who's talking about this on the waste management side? Like, what is happening on the back end of this? We need to bring all of the people together. And so she is very much thinking in systems. She has a whole education platform. So if you want to find out what sort of letter you would need to write to your representative in government, she has a form for you that tells you how you can advocate for the change you want to see and how to be the change you want to see. And so she has a 4-pillar platform that it's called EPIC. It's education, policy. I forget what the last two, but the one is her plastics division and the other is the cleanup. And so it all comes together. And so she's building infrastructure, systems change. And so, yeah, Chloe is absolutely one of our, yeah. I did. I'm just going to repeat the question for the live stream. So the question from the audience is about profit and how do our ventures think about that? How does that counteract, or how does that jive with how PE firms think about it? What does it mean to us when you're wanting to do the right thing? pay living wages. How do we, right? How do we balance all that? And I wish I had a better answer for you. And the answer is that it takes more time and it takes more money to do the right thing. So one of the ventures I talked to literally had 2 sets of books. And so, so she stripped out, because the ventures fund said, we would love to fund you. Like, you are amazing. You're exactly what you're looking for, but we would love it if your profits were higher. We're looking for a higher rate of return. And so what we're finding is that even in the ESG or the impact space, people are still looking for unicorn-like returns. They want the big scale, they want the big returns. And so she's like, okay, well, I'll strip out all the stuff that I do that makes me eligible for your impact fund. And they're like, great, we want those profits. She's like, yeah, but if I did that, I don't qualify for your impact funds. Like, this is not a cost, it's an investment. And I think that's the difference in framing of that. All of the companies I interviewed think about it in terms of an investment. This is an investment in our future. It's an investment in our people. This is an investment in avoided cost in terms of healthcare, in terms of, right, all of the things we know that are interrelated. PE hasn't caught up to that. So by and large, I would say I was really surprised to discover my background. I'm a chartered financial analyst. I worked in institutional finance for a long time. So I was surprised to learn how many ventures were so disheartened by early experiences with venture capital that so many of them just stay out of the pool. So they are staying, and not to say that they're small ventures, but they're staying in the kiddie pool where the waters are warm and friendly. They're not going in with the sharks, and they're not searching because they don't want to give up the control. They don't want to be forced to abandon their values. So there's been some brilliant tactics, some of which I talk about in the report and they expand, where some companies are enshrining their commitments in their actual articles of incorporation. So should they get acquired, it survives them. So they can't be changed. And so some of the tactics were very much into the governance. So so I break all that down into the report in some of the nitty gritty. I don't want to get too, because I could talk about it for hours. There are so many different ways and means of that the companies achieved what seemed to be unachievable. But by and large, most of the companies are self-funding. So they're bootstrapping, they're funding from profits, or they're seeking grants or philanthropic alignment. So very few private equity injections. There was a few, but by far the exception. No, not at all. Yeah, that's a great question. So the question from the audience was, and I'm sorry, I don't know your name, Robin. The question was whether or not the companies were building to build their own empires, right? Like, were they building to advance their own wealth, their family's wealth? Was it meant to stay within, the family estate, as it were? Or were they building it to more of a distributive model? And I would say that yeah, especially when it comes to fair wages, one company had a great statement about how if you have money left over to do philanthropy, you've done it wrong the whole time. Right? You've been extractive the whole time. If, and she named names and we all get packages from them like on the regular. So with smiley faces on them. So, but she mentioned that specifically about how if we have that much left over, we have not it's been extractive. And so, have we been paying fair wages? Have we been taking care of the health? Have we been taking care of our externalities, the economists would call them? Like, are we dealing with our pollution, dealing with all of that sort of stuff? So yeah, that was for sure. That was a 7-generation view. There was quite a few Indigenous companies so community model and giving wealth to the community was a big focus, not just with the Indigenous, but with a lot of the companies that I interviewed for sure. Great questions. Any other questions before I tell you more about some of this? So one of the big venture success stories, well, we had two. So we've had two ventures that have successfully eliminated plastics from their supply chain. So Beam Paints, and Anang Beam is a rock star. Like if she ever starts a business school, sign me up, because she has she has a zero waste facility. She pays living wages. She has absolutely everything is safe for the environment, safe for people, safe for planet, safe for the water. Like everything she does is meant to not only be non-extractive, but to contribute back to the environment. So he has reciprocity baked in right from the get-go, and giving back to the community and growing the community in and of itself. So Anong got an order from a major Canadian retailer, Indigo Books and Music, and Indigo wanted to carry her project, and they said, well, you know, just put them on pallets and we will shrink wrap them and ship them. And she said, nope. No, we will not. And they're like, well, what do you mean? Like, we can't order from you. And she's like, you know, are you open to, if we can find another solution, you know, and to Indigo's, they were, but initially she had the guts to say, no, we are turning down this order unless we can find a way to do it our way. And Gelchini Stainless was the other. So again, another rock star in her portfolio. So she also had a similar experience where she said, we do not do plastic. Like the whole ethos of this company is to eliminate plastics, and to eliminate plastics from our food supply chain and and he said, absolutely not, we are not doing that. So had the courage to turn down that order, and again, reworked with them to find a way to deliver plastic free in the supply chain. So, so no is a possibility. And the common themes were, I would say, in terms of skills or ability, negotiation was absolutely one of them. Like whether it comes to aligned funders, whether it comes to suppliers and looking to get, hey, I want that product, but I can't order a metric ton. You know, what can you do for me? You know, I have this much quantity. Can I bundle with somebody else who makes the similar thing? The ability to find win-win, aligned, negotiated was absolutely one of the key things. We talked about already community networking, the ability to find people. You got to be your people. We cannot do this alone. There is too much to know. There's too much for a CEO to know. Sonia Strobel talked about that, said, we need all hands on deck. This cannot just be the CEO. We need to, you know, your staff are most likely who are, you know, the people who are interacting might have the easiest wins, that you're dealing with the bigger picture stuff in the larger organizations anyway, and you might not know where those easy wins are to be able to, you know, reduce your footprint or to make changes that could ultimately save cost. And I love Anong's sentiment, which he borrowed from Buckminster Fuller, which is waste is just resources we haven't assigned value to, right? Like waste is for the luxury. And more than one venture pointed out that historically, if this was 150 years ago, we would be living beside our waste. So if we had to do that, how much waste would we be generating? Right? Like it would be an entirely different game, but out of sight, out of mind. And so we are in a paradigm where we don't necessarily think about the impact that we're having by our consumption because it's invisible to us. And so that was certainly a key theme. Another key theme was again on the measurement and the fact that sustainability is a complex beast, and it takes a minute to learn the language and to learn the metrics and to learn what all of the key measurements, how to measure impact, how to measure carbon, how to measure the offsets, how to bake that into policy. And so that was some of the within the four walls. I asked the question, you know, that's great that you have these enshrined in your values if you do. And another question I asked a lot was, okay, to what extent are these your personal values if you're still the founder and CEO versus the company values? How have those changed? Are they the same? How did you arrive at those new sets of values? And then how do those live and breathe within the organization? So has that made it into policy? Has it made it into procedure? how does that, how are you holding yourself accountable to your values? And so those were and so there's amazing examples and great answers all throughout the report of companies that are doing amazing things to enshrine their values, to live their values. And I think we heard that on the stage today, is that, you know, we're in Coralus because we are in this community because we want to do. We don't just want to sit back and be philanthropists and, you know, hope that our $100 we send somewhere does something. We're here to make a difference. And so these companies really are showing us the way of how they do it. So there are more than 29 profiles. They each have wisdom to share. And then we have the collected wisdom grouped into each of the 4 categories and into, you know, how they found their networks. And literally it is a how-to, you know, go to the mayor's breakfast. They, you know, talk to your local economic development people. Like there is, you know, it is very tactical, practical on the how to and what to measure, how to measure, what sort of frameworks were helpful, how people moved through the phases to advance them. So because it is expensive and time consuming to do it, to do sustainability, the faster and easier we can make it all for each other by sharing our knowledge, it just makes us all go farther faster. And in general, that's the whole idea. So yeah, I would love feedback on the report. Coralus thinks that this could be one of a series of reports. So we want to see, we're excited to put this into the community and see how it takes shape. And so if this guide is informative, if we need to go deeper, if we need to go broader, if you know, these are the types of things, then how do we bring it to life? And so this, you know, one of the things that came is, to your question, Robin, is when you're, and to your question about how we are paying people, like how do we do the social well? You know, how do we treat our people well? And so that could be one of our next investigations. Like what does next generation maternity policies looks like? How do we offer childcare? How do we pay for wages while ensuring that we can fight the good fight and be profitable? Because we all need to be profitable, and profit, we heard over and over again, profit is not a dirty word. And so it's, you know, we have to all be here. And sometimes that means choices, right? In my business now, I've had to make a choice of, you know, you have to start and then do better as you go. And with the objective of finding out where you could do better and when the right time is to layer those things in. But yeah, it's absolutely imperative that we are able to be self-sustaining first. Absolutely. I have no idea how I'm doing for time, so I'm going to also pause there for questions. 10 minutes left. Look at me go. It's because I'm a fast talker from finance. Hi. The guide, sustainability.coralus.world. Yeah, sustainability.coralus.world is where our landing page for the report is, and all of the framework and profiles will be up there. I'm not sure if the page is live today, but if not, stay tuned, coming soon. It might be in the app too. I love how Emmy was calling it the hoo-ha app. I very much enjoyed that. Yes. Yeah. So we tried to keep it light, and there was so much information. I mean, I could have written 1,000 pages, but we tried to keep it short and distill to some of the essence of the distilled wisdom, and then each of the ventures, and Brenda Dragon and who is just in the room here, and what she's doing in terms of her perspective on the animal population and the pushback that she gets for harvesting beavers without people understanding that beavers are subject to over and underpopulation, and that, you know, her products actually help control and help the health of the overall population, and that the goods that she, you know, that every part of the beaver gets used, and that it goes back into feed, and that you know, this natural way of life. And, you know, you're not going to convince everyone of that. However, there's nuance to it that people don't always fully appreciate. And so, and 100%, every venture said storytelling. You have to be able to tell your story. You have to be able to communicate to people why you, why now, why people should care, why it matters to do the right thing. When it costs more, it takes more time. And storytelling was, it matters to your funders, it matters to your people, it matters to your customers and your clients, and being responsive to that client demand, right? Like you have to know your market to know what pricing and what your market will bear. And, Isle talked about, we could absolutely have a perfect product, but we would have to double our price. So we have to make choices along the way. We know what the market will bear, and we pay for, it's the, everyone wants fair wages. We want the perfect green product, and we want it to be cheap. Well, we have 2 out of 3, right? We don't get all of those things. And so it's that balance of knowing where your customers, and Anong talked about that, her products, so Beam paints, which have a phenomenal artistic quality. So, I mean, not only are they super pretty to look at and zero waste, but their photoluminescent property has been like art museums, and Harvard has asked her to speak on how she did it because they cannot figure it out. And so it's not only that they're super cool, but they are like super, super, super high quality that like art restorers use her stuff. So, and she also has a line, she has patents, she has line of home goods coming. And so, yeah, so in this, but her local banker has from time to time looked at her as, just a young person from the reserve. And meanwhile, she has a multi-million-dollar business growing out of, and so Anong's a rock star for sure. So so her products are, when I got to hear about some of the properties, and everything is water safe, and all the zero waste, and all the water is reused, and she just distills out the pigment from the bottom of the waste jar, and that gets reused into the whole thing is just miraculous. It is really, in how she fine-tuned her operations for just in time and to accommodate to her people's schedule. And so that scheduling became more effective because she took into the account the needs of the community when she built her schedule. And I mean, I could have written an entire book on Ongs alone. So, but her profile is definitely well worth reading in terms of her insights, but so much rich knowledge within our community if we look. So, another invitation to connect to one another and find out what you got. What do you know? Have you encountered this? How did you solve this? And so, it was, as always, my pleasure. I love talking to ventures and finding out what they do and how they're moving and grooving in the world and what change they're making and how I can support them. And so, and it was super fun. Like Vicky, I am a connector. So I was able to I think Vicky and MJ counted because they do that, but I think I was able to connect 120 people who hadn't interacted before and create connections. So I was able to connect Better Packaging, hadn't met Chloe Dubois. So we were, the sort of the across the oceans that, hey, you're both doing ocean recycled plastic. Maybe you all should talk. So, so that was a super fun part as well, to be able to connect and see how our game-changing portfolios. Yeah, Bree. For sure.
So I was curious when you were talking about the framework of start, grow, deepen, expand, surpass. How do you mentioned it not as the only framework, but in surpass space, which I find a little curious. I'm an expert in B-Corp certification. I've done B-Corp for a number of the ventures in that report.
Yeah.
And I think it's like a really great framework in many ways, but it often misses the external. So I would say like the internal, external, like really good in the internal, not so well, not so good, but there's something missing in the external.
Amazing.
And I'm at a loss when I think about like what is the B Corp of external. I'm really at a loss of kind of like looking at some of these frameworks that really exist. So my question is not what is the framework, but what were some of the gaps that were coming up from the ventures in terms of like, if we're thinking about a how-to guide where they were saying, well, what were the crunchy periods where they're like, I haven't really figured that out. There's not a consistency. Like there's not really a how-to, or there's just like seeds of a how-to, but not really a how-to. What might have been some of the places that were like, from gaps or punchy periods?
For sure. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Great question. So talking about how B Corp is really good about some of the internal, the processes, the policies, and really it is a very self-reflective, internally reflective sort of process. It's like Yeah, it talks about external, but it's mostly internal four walls. Yeah. Yeah, so the external. So aside from the UN SDGs, which are inherent to, our Coralus community, some of the gaps that, one of the for sure gaps, I mean, we hear it all the time, we hear it within the ventures, is that packaging is an internal, is the enduring internal problem for anyone that in the CPG space, anyone who has to ship anything anywhere, packaging is a problem. And it's, it's the plastics problem. It's the, how do you make it light and non-dimensional weights and all to play the game and avoid air and only do, rail or, sort of the multimodal while still being able to meet your clients' demands and expectations for just-in-time delivery, because we're used to that smiley, happy thing arriving at our door. So, and the fact that consumer education was also a huge one, because we're separated from our waste. We don't have does anyone know what happens when we wash our hands and it goes down the sink and where it all goes? How many of us are fully versed on what happens in the whole waste supply chain for all of our waste? And so that whole dissociation between what happens for when something leaves our house and the magic people come and pick it up and it's no longer part of our problem or part of our world, that consumer education, and also just, that whole, we've now been conditioned that everything should be free shipping. Well, we all know shipping isn't free. We all do, because we occasionally have to return those packages and we have to pay. So we all, right. And so even when I had my former business, I one of the enduring requests I had to Shopify was to say, I want to show people how much it costs me to ship this to them. The fact that I'm making it free for them, I want to see it as a charge and then a deduction so that they understand that there is a cost, but it doesn't show and people just go, oh, it's free. So that was for sure one of the gaps. Packaging, plastics, what are the other gaps? For sure, it's also the funding, right? It's, enduring, because so one of the solutions I proposed in my head coming from an extractive industry background, but there's tax credits for certain things that are refundable. So, or even if we look in the health space, if you are celiac, if you have to, for example, spend on gluten-free food in Canada, you can get that's tax deductible for you. And so there are no benefits within our tax system for doing the right thing. None whatsoever. It just costs more money. Well done, you. Good for you. You are now less likely to get funded. You are now less likely to, right? You have less profits to distribute. You have all of this stuff. Well done. Right. So aside from your moral pat on the back, there's nothing, there are no benefits. And so that's a huge systemic thing that, there are so many policy interventions that we could have, that super minor tweaks that could really encourage and incentivize that behavior. And to make it so that, right, even if it's one company was like, why should I have to pay for a business license? It should be in order to renew your license, your business license, you should have to be able to prove, compliance with this, that, or the other thing, right? There's lots of, and I'm not suggesting that is our immediately operational idea, but there's lots of little ways and means that we can incentivize and nudge people to do the right things and to make the right choices. Oh.
That is so easy to push gender.
Yeah, so tax for gender, and in Italy. Yeah, and so there's lots of climate related things that we could be doing. Climate, social, right? If you're paying for wages, there's so many things that we could be doing on the policy side to encourage that behavior. Robin? Yeah. Yeah. And that was, so more and more companies, to Robin's point, they do have procurement checkboxes that they're trying to meet. So women is certainly one of them. And, again, from that, from my extractive business. So I used to be an international oil and gas analyst. And so what we would see quite often is that engineers are looking for, so this is an enduring problem of CapEx versus OpEx. So the capital, so are we going to make an out-of-pocket investment in a piece of equipment? Or can I lease it and just turn it into payments, right? We've all, right? Like, do I have $1 million to buy my house, or can I just turn it into payments, right? That's the personal finance equivalent to that. So every business would rather have payments than to put the capital outlay. And so if we're going to incentivize the capital outlay, you know, for example, our deductions, our capital allocations, for amortization could be changed, right? Or following the Norway model where it's cash tax rebates for certain things. But so there's those sorts of like policy push nudge type things that happen. But procurement, sustainability isn't on a lot of procurement or engineering profiles either, right? They're looking at the least cost solution, and sustainability isn't always on. So that's also something, right? De-risking it. Part of the communication strategy for sure is de-risking the purchase for your customer, especially where there's a new environmental technology. How can you make it easier for them to say yes? And that's part of the storytelling, that's part of the funding and part of the financing. And there's ways around all of that. And that's part of our shared collective wisdom about how we do that for sure. Because there are ways around it. We just need to tell the story. Are there any more questions for me? I think I got my 5-minute warning. If not, time's up. There we go. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for a great question. It was nice to chat with you.